instructors.
Okay.
But not for this year,
So
but
more
maybe for the
structure.
next year.
All right, 7 o'clock. Let's call to order the 7, excuse me, July 10th, 2024 Parks and Recreation Board meeting. Start with roll call. Vice President Ryan Cambridge.
Here.
Secretary Michael Kaufman.
Here.
Chris Burksdale.
Here.
Kimberly Lane.
Here.
Chad Daly.
Here.
Matt Milburn, excuse me. And I, John Slevich, President, is here as well. Next is the approval of the May 8th, 2024 minutes. Ever get a chance to review? Any questions or concerns?
June 12th. June 12th.
June 12th, whatever, yeah, sorry. I wrote the wrong date on here, so sorry. June 12th. Do we have a
I moved
a
to,
movement? Sorry, my brain is, that one's there.
I moved to approve the minutes
Okay.
from June
Do we have a
12th.
second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
I abstain since I was not.
Yep, yes.
Yep.
And I as well abstain.
Okay, 2 abstain,
That's in
okay,
here,
very
yeah.
good. Motion carries. Next is public comment and presentations. Anyone have anything to say in line up front? Okay. Park Foundation updates.
Yes. Okay. So a lot of grant money has come in. Since 2 months ago, they had a planting of close to 200 common milkweed along the rail trail near Heritage Trail Park with 27 volunteers. That was a grant from Monarch Watch. And they've received $15,000 from Duke Energy Foundation for a wildlife blind at the Carpenter Nature Preserve. And they received their first installment from Eli Lilly Boone County for an outdoor classroom at Carpenter Nature Preserve. And they're the host of a Go All In Day through United Way of Central Indiana. That was on June 21st. They sanded and stained picnic benches with a $1,000 grant from United Way for supplies. And finally, they were awarded a programming grant from the Community Foundation of Boone County for a service berry giveaway this fall. And then they're looking into a fundraising breakfast event in the fall.
Well,
Got a lot going on.
yes, very much so. It's fantastic. Anyone have any questions or? Great work, of course. I appreciate that. All right, staff reports. Superintendent Jared Logson.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Park Board. Just highlight a couple of items from the superintendent report. Maintenance staff have been busy adding stone to the Holiday Trail, which will soon open to the public. Just smoothing out some of the inconsistencies near Pleasant View Road. Also calling in locates for signage that will be placed along that stretch. So we do anticipate that opening up later this summer to the community, but it remains closed at this time. The maintenance staff also installed a memorial bench along the Big Four at the Spring Knoll subdivision. Our natural resource team finished planting their spring trees. This spring they purchased over 200 trees in April and finally got them all in the ground. They also established 2 native beds, one on the Pine Street ramp down to the Big Four Rail Trail, and also 2 coming along on the Mulberry Tunnel. So the goal is to cut back some of that invasive species that are causing blind spots near the roundabout. So first and foremost, improving safety and visibility sightlines for vehicular traffic, but also having that area serve a purpose as we repurpose it to prairie and pollinator species along the tunnel. I've been working on the Mulberry Fields concession stand design, and that continues with REA and Delve Architects. The Turkey Foot Bridge rehabilitation of the approaches is moving along as well. I've seen an early draft and made some revisions. We should have an updated copy of that draft layout for you all to review later this year. And pending any additional comments and feedback, we would be ready for a November bid for that project. The Big Four armoring of the erosion spots along right outside here of Town Hall as well as Blower Road were completed by MCI. I think they wrapped that up in just about a day, so that was really quick turnaround on that. And the Big Four connections to Trailside Elementary and Hampshire subdivision have also been completed. And that was a partnership with a DPW contract for the pathways that are now on 875 and 400. So we were glad to partner with DPW on that, and now we have those school and neighborhood connections to our Big Four rail trail. And that is all from the superintendent report.
Very good. Any other questions?
I have a
Yes,
general
sir.
question. Oh, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Do those side paths, are they then ongoing maintenance by DPW, or do they become part of the trail network?
We will maintain them as part of the trail network, those two interior paths that I mentioned, but any roadside pathways are the responsibility of DPW.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, Director of Recreation Services, Mindy Murdoch.
All right, good evening, everyone. All right, so
Hello.
June brought us summer camps. So in total, we had 47 scheduled programs on the June calendar. With those, 13, I had to count, 13 different camps. We had a lot of our one-day camps that we did, as well as our June versions for nature navigators and backyard explorers. So July, we're finishing up those camps. Actually, this week right now is junior IMN, so which we have 18 kids signed up for and going through that program. So outside of camps, we did offer a few other programs, but again, camps kind of take up the majority of it. The only other thing in June was that we had our Zionsville Nature Play Days as well. We had 17 programs. Unfortunately, a couple of those were canceled, either from low registration or just because of just not good weather. But we had a lot of our returning favorites as well as a lot of new ones to add to it, such as the Zionsville Fire Department brought in their sirens and suds. The police department did a 10K bike ride, and then we did a family paint out at Mulberry Fields. So I just wanted to give a huge thanks. This is a program that's been going on. I believe this is now the 8th year for Nature Play Days, and we get a lot of different organizations playing with us. So just a huge thanks to the Zionsville Fire Department, Zionsville Police Department, Sullivan Muntz, Hussey Mayfield Memorial Public Library, as well as Boone County Solid Waste and even the Farmers Market letting us play. So another thing that we started in June is we are doing a summer science series for teens and adults. So if you haven't looked up those, they're kind of interesting topics that we worked with the library on kind of finding some different speakers. So we've had one on conservation with the Indianapolis Zoo with Corley Palmer, who used to be on the park board. We also did one on the James Webb Telescope in June. We have one coming up this Saturday, which is actually from the Reef, and they're doing a whole kind of in-dive, not to be pun intended, in-dive depth on home aquariums, both saltwater and freshwater, and kind of answering all the questions you might have on starting your own aquarium at home. So something kind of different, interesting to look at for adults who maybe want to do a park program, but maybe don't want to be outside in 90 degrees. So you can sit in air conditioning and listen to someone talk to you. So we are finalizing up the wrap for the Trail Hopper. And so we're hoping that wrap will be finished sometime this month, and that it'll get wrapped up and we'll be able to debut it right at the end of summer. So other than that, if you guys have any questions.
Fantastic work as always.
Great job.
Appreciate it. All right, Park Attorney, Amy Noonan.
Yes, I just have a couple of quick updates, some pieces of good news. It's been a while since we've talked about this one, but you may recall that we were in communication with the Spring Knoll Homeowners Association for a while regarding the portions of the rail trail that go through Spring Knoll, all of which have been there for a really long time, but some of which were never evidenced by a written recorded easement. So I'm happy to report that we have a signed trail easement from them that John is going to sign tonight. So that is going to be wrapped up. And the second piece of information, just to update you on, is that we also have a signed Greenway Path and Creek Management Easement Agreement from the Lions Club. Actually, it's the Lions Park, Inc., as the grantor to us for the connector pathway between Elm Street Green and Lions Park. So, good news.
Excellent.
On those
Fantastic.
fronts.
Is that it?
Yes. that's
Wonderful.
it for now.
Awesome. All right, new business, Carpenter Nature Preserve, conservation easement.
Pull the screen up here just for a visual reference. All right, is that on your monitors?
Not yet.
Not yet?
No.
Not yet. Okay.
It's trying.
It's trying to?
There it is.
Okay, perfect. Excellent.
No, can you?
It's okay.
I was like, well, you can see it. As you may recall, as part of the Carpenter Nature Preserve process, we did apply for several grants that would help us not only get this project or the property in our possession, but also move forward with an initial phase of development. So this is that last step with the DNR before we could procure the $3 million reimbursement for the acquisition of Carpenter Nature Preserve. So these funds are vital for us to move forward with construction when it is time to do so. So this is one of those last steps, and that is to place a conservation easement on a portion of the preserve. So that portion, as you'll look on the image provided, it is not the full 215 acres, it is actually just 173. And that was purposely coordinated with the DNR so that our future nature center and potential White Oaks Common multi-use space would not conflict with the conservation easement, which the priority of that is to maintain open spaces and outdoor recreation and natural habitat. So that was very purposeful and well coordinated with the DNR. So this exhibit is what would adjoin that easement language that you had in your packets for your review. So I just wanted to invite any comments or concerns with the language in that. I know it is quite complex, and that is because it is actually anticipating 3 different grant and funding opportunities and therefore deed restrictions associated with it. So as I mentioned, this would be the next level conservation trust, conservation easement. We also were awarded the Land Water Conservation Fund grant, which would place its own federal conservation easement over a portion of the property. And then the Carpenters, working with the DNR through the In Lieu in Swamp program, would also have a third conservation easement on portions of the park. So coordinating all those and making sure that it's concise of what's being prescribed with which languages concerning those 3 different things is very important. So after discussion this evening, I would request this board's consideration to authorize John as Park Board President to sign that conservation easement pending final review, edits, and negotiations with the Park Board Attorney and myself and John with the DNR. So that was a mouthful.
Quick question, do all 3 have the same footprint?
They all have separate footprints.
Separate footprints, okay.
The Nature Center is a permitted use with the Land Water Conservation Fund because it is an extension of outdoor recreation. So that portion of the footprint would be within the Land Water Conservation's footprint, which is not being proposed before you just yet. So essentially, this is just the easement for next level, but anticipating and incorporating those other clauses that'll come along. So not to contradict when those other layers do get placed on here. And further, when it mentions in swamp within that text, those exact parameters have been agreed upon, but they haven't been defined and surveyed yet. So that information will probably come step 3.
And will we be able to, in the context of the Land Water Conservation Grant easement, the Nature Center being a part of that, we'll still be able to charge fees for rentals and that sort of
Yes,
thing?
as I understand it and confirmed with them, if it is to support itself as a program, it is a permitted use. But parking lot fees would not be, for example.
Well, I'll make a motion to authorize John to sign the easement as proposed, pending any further negotiations with Park Board Attorney and Park Director.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next is the Carpenter Nature Preserve design update.
Thank you very much. And moving right along, so you just promised to prohibit some things out there, but I want to show you what we've been working on to actually place out there. So with me this evening is Tricia McCollum of Runsdell Ernstberger and Associates, and she has been spearheading the design of Phase 1 construction with Delve Architects as well. So I will turn it over to Tricia if she's ready to share with you all the good news.
I get to watch how long it takes me to get the HDMI in. Okay. So next month, we'll be getting construction documents for you. So we wanted to give you an update before sending that full packet to you for phase 1 construction. So just to start with, we made a few changes to the master plan from what you've seen before. Just changed a few of the pathway layouts so that we're minimizing bridges and minimizing the crossings to the tributaries that we'll be doing those in-swamp restoration projects too. The other thing is we've also included a paved path that will go all the way down to Eagle Creek, which we didn't have before. The tree canopy walk used to run in this woodland behind the nature center, and you can't see my cursor at all. We have moved that. It's the brown that kind of goes across the middle there, and you see the tree canopy label. So we've moved that so that it actually will be able to come land next to the playground and go over a couple valleys. So it'll be fully accessible, but you'll still get that tree canopy walk without having to have stairs that get up to it or anything like that. It takes advantage of the site a little bit better. And it allows us, that woodland that's behind the nature center is one of the best pure, not damaged woodlands on the site. So that'll keep us out of that area and allow us to preserve that better. Other than that, those are kind of just the main changes. The master plan itself really is very similar to what we had before, just little tweaks to make it work a little bit better. So what's included with phase 1? The Prairie Pavilion and Playground will be the main feature for phase 1, and we'll show you what that's going to look like. The main entrance drive that now goes back to the clubhouse, we'll have it gated so that it can be opened if there's an event at the amphitheater, but really we want to guide people to the Prairie Pavilion where there will be restrooms and seating, and again, that playground that'll be up there at the Prairie Pavilion. The white is showing you the paved paths. So we've got, a paved path that goes all the way out to the overlook, and that's one of the best overlooks over Eagle Creek itself. You can see, if you look north, you can see pretty far up Eagle Creek, and it is elevated quite a bit from where Eagle Creek is. And then a paved path that also goes all the way out to the amphitheater. It's very hard to see on the screen, but there's a lighter, and I don't know if you could see it in your packet, a lighter brown color, which is rustic paths. So those won't be paved, they'll be in stone. They'll still be accessible, but they just give a lighter footprint to the site. And those go around that close to the northern pond, and then they create some other loops there in the site. And the amphitheater will be a part of phase 1. And then another overlook, that will essentially just be a mowed lawn area. But that area, we have a feeling will be very, people want to have maybe weddings there or small ceremonies there, because it's another one that kind of looks out over the valley of the site. As a part of this, we've been working through just some graphics, and should have been included in your packet. These 3 QR codes go to 3 different views. And what you can do is actually, it's like you're standing in the site, and you can either scroll 360 to see what it's going to look like, or there's a symbol you can push on and you can turn, and it's like you're in the site and you can see what it's going to look like, showing you different views. And that's for the tree canopy overlook. We've got one that's showing wildlife blind more down in the valley, and then the overlook from the future nature center, or the 3 views that those 360s show you. We'll have a map that is very similar to this up in one of the conference rooms on the 2nd floor. So if you have anybody that wants to donate or is interested in Carpenter, you can take them up there and show them, and it'll have the QR codes too. So again, they can do the same thing just to see what the site is going to look like. Did a few just still shots, again, mainly for fundraising. This is that tree canopy walk which shows you, again, how it's kind of up in the canopy, and you can see the path that goes underneath of it. And again, that's all, following natural grade. Haven't completely designed out, so this is still very, conceptual, but gives you an idea of what we're thinking for that tree canopy walk. And just another prairie walk, that's sort of the rustic path down in there where it's the stone rather than the paved path in through the prairies. And the Prairie Pavilion, wanted to give you a sneak peek of what that's going to look like. So this is a view actually from the parking lot. We'll have some stormwater planters with some native plantings that'll be there in front of the building itself. The structure, that interior structure where you see the Prairie Pavilion and the map, that's where the restrooms will be, and I'll show you a plan view of that here real quick. And then the playground that actually will sit kind of in the back. On the one end that faces the parking lot, we're going to have essentially a green, viney screen where vines can grow up, just to kind of give another wall to that area in there, while kind of getting you more into the natural area of the space. So these are go ahead, you got a question?
I was just gonna ask if you could talk a little bit about the playground itself. Is there a theme to it? Is it a nature-based play or adventure-based play?
It is.
Have you gotten that far yet, I guess?
It is, and we just did, so it's not in your packet, but I've got a couple slides here after the building where I can show you
Okay.
what we're thinking for the playground.
Very cool.
Just took us a little bit longer to get to that point than could get it in the packet. These are the views, very schematic of the pavilion itself, but again, you can see the structure where the restroom buildings are, and then that roof line that extends. There'll be somewhat of I'll call it a patio space, where, it could be if you've got field trips out there, that's a great gathering place, or a place to teach with picnic tables. And then on the other side is another shaded sort of plaza space next to the playground, where parents can sit in the shade and watch kids that are playing. So top corner is showing you the view from the parking lot, and then seeing the other view of the parking lot that's behind it. Just showing you all four views, and it gives you a better idea of the slope of that roof, which does give it, kind of represents the character of the building that we're thinking out there.
Excuse me, is there any I'm just asking, to put any solar panels on the top of that to feed?
We actually
need.
looked at that, and what was the years, like 40 years? Because of the power that we could get, because of the roof surface that we had, it was like 40 years to pay off to see the benefit of the cost of those solar panels.
Okay.
It's just not enough space. Future phases, we're talking about this parking area and potentially, and again, it just depends on how the calculations work out, but having solar panels over the parking areas where the cars would park underneath of it. So we did look at it. It just didn't make sense for that additional cost with this phase, given the limited space that we had.
Okay.
Similar question, what about like a light green roof system? Was that ever considered?
We didn't look at that. We looked at the solar panels, but we didn't look at more the intensive, I think is what it's called, green roof. That's something we could look at.
Yeah, I think it would be a cool demonstration. I think that there's this balance, right, of, the ROI on solar, especially in our climate, is not there unless you have a really large scale. But I think there's value in these public projects in being a demonstration of this technology and making it more present and visible. So I'm all in favor of where it makes sense, within the budget, obviously, of having demonstration projects. And I think green roofs are something that would be very fitting for Carpenter. I don't know if this is the appropriate location, but I think that's something that maybe
We
should
can
be
look into
considered.
it, yeah.
I agree with Ryan. I think this is a chance that maybe we don't do the whole roof, but there's a place to make it a demonstration where we can tie back into the educational piece, what nature provides for us and how we're maximizing it.
Yeah, we can definitely look at,
Something I wanted to do with the new library branch, and I didn't get to make happen.
Yes, well, structurally, we'll just need to look at it structurally to see if there's any changes. And, yeah, that's the main thing, I think, is structurally to see. And then the cost then of adding the trays that essentially we have to add on the top.
Yeah, I would, if you're gonna look into that, I would recommend a tray system over
Yeah.
like a mat or anything, but it could be a light tray.
Yeah, and part of this exercise for the Prairie Pavilion was also to explore some themes that would be in the Nature Center. And we thought that would be a much larger application, obviously, for both solar and potentially an earthen roof. So definitely keeping those concepts viable. And we really did try to explore that with this structure, but ultimately to have pinching pennies anyways for things that we can include, it just didn't make sense. And with the life of solar panels, we wouldn't see that return. But agreed, just like Overly Warman with its wind and solar, parking lot light, we're always open to those opportunities. Helps us from running utilities too, so
Exactly.
win-win.
Jared, question about that. When you're looking at all these different pieces, who maintenance this building?
That will be our in-house maintenance team.
Does your team have the skill set, expertise, knowledge base to be able to keep these systems up to date?
The systems within this
What
structure,
the team here is proposing?
future solar?
Yeah.
No, well, not today, but
So that's where I would challenge the board to think not only the upfront capital, but the ongoing, I'm like conflicted about the whole Carpenter Nature Preserve. Super excited about the potential, yet I don't feel like I have a good grasp of like tactically how we're operating that and how it ties into a long-range financial plan of the town, right? Simply put, like, will you have the budget to operate this as effectively as we want to? And I think these are all worthwhile discussions to look at, but I think we need line of sight as we're tacking on these nice features to, will your team even be able to maintain them long-term?
Yep.
So.
That's a great point.
Well, and I think too, as you get into, 100% agree that there should be a plan in place for that. But I think, Jared, as much as you have, especially over the last 5 years, really increased the internal capacity of the department to self-perform substantially more than ever had been done. There are, when it comes to especially some of those emerging technology things or anything where it starts to involve warranty service, a lot of that ends up being outsourced anyway. But I think it's something to consider up front is how are we going to address this? Not necessarily if we can't do it in-house, we shouldn't do it, but what are the implications for how we're going to manage it long term? Now, I will say too, I think a benefit, green roofs are a little bit different where, once the structure is designed to accommodate them, there's not as much regular maintenance, or repair beyond, roof leaks or things like that would be not probably related to the green roof system. But, yeah, I agree. It's something to consider. I just don't want to say we're not going to do new things because we can't maintain them in-house or can't service them in-house, but I agree that whatever we take on, we need to have a plan.
Have a plan.
We have a plan and a budget
Yep.
for how we're going to do
Yep.
it.
Yeah, and
there's-
echoing that underlying concern, like, I think some of this is before my time on this board, not knowing what the big picture financial cost of adding this to the system is and what that looks like long-term, and I'm sure that's being considered, but it might be helpful to see how that all plays into this.
Do we
And
have?
it's also the 5-year plan, and also, we had some extensive research and such, and part of that 5-year plan shows,
Show some of that.
some of that growth and where we're gonna add people and how we're gonna have to add people as the time goes, so.
Okay.
Is there a long-range financial plan within the town that I would consider that ideal state ties into the long-range financial plan? Of the
Well,
town?
I mean, our 5-year plan is approved by the town board, so the town board knows where we wanna go, so it's.
And I've been very clear with our elected officials of the need in 2026, as we open this preserve of the resources we'll have to have before we turn that key and unlock that gate.
What year did you say?
2026 is our anticipated ribbon cutting for phase one. Yes.
Means you have new people coming on the board, right? There's new town councilors. I just think for the long-term financial health of the town, and it's not an either or, it's an and. The long-term financial health of the town and to have an excellent experience at Carpenter, that this needs to bubble up and at least get a confirmation, John, to your assumption, right? Because coming in as a newcomer, that it feels like a assumption, and I would love to kind of take that assumption and turn it into a fact that we know confidently we'll have this starting at 26. So
And
what's the best path for that? Is that we get somebody from like a finance committee to come in? Is that, how do we bring, and this is a newcomer question, right? How do we get these different governing bodies of the town to provide clarity on this?
So operationally, we've estimated a budget of what it'll take to open up this 215 acres with the amenities on site. So that would be my proposition for those budgets moving forward.
Okay.
What we can do in 2024 through 2026 is really champion the dire need for those resources prior to this being able to be open. So, we did float a municipal bond for this project to take forth, and then the grants allowed us to actually move from just conceptual to this construction. So without those operational expenditures matching stride, it's going to fail. So I've been very deliberate with that message, and we'll continue to message that to our elected officials.
But I think that has to be something that's considered as we look long-term in the growth of Zionsville, because I think, and again, this is as a resident of, less than 10 years, but, we've been adding a lot to the system, and all of it's really great, but it is more active and less passive, right, than in the past. There's not the Starkey, it's natural resource management, right? It's not as complicated as maintaining a nature center or a sports complex or certainly an indoor facility. But that has been an express goal of the town, I think, is to add those facilities to our system. So yeah, it can't be a, either or, it has to be an and. How are we gonna do that? Not just on the capital side, which is sometimes easier to fund through bonds
It's not in perpetuity.
Right, but with operational side, that's gonna come through predominantly the general fund or partnerships. So I think every year as we get into budgets, I think there was a precedent set for, and this is my opinion solely, but for many years prior to you joining, that, the parks budget was what it was and it stayed what it was. And that's not the case because we're expanding and actively growing our system, not just in its scale, but also in its sophistication and its impact, right? And so the operational budget needs to grow in accordance with that, or we're gonna see problems with the capital that we're able to fund.
And-
So,
And I think that'd be a question also for the foundation, what's, I'm not just, and it may have been presented and I missed it, but aware of what the maintenance endowment goals are for this project and what portion of funds raised are going towards a maintenance endowment. Because that's one way to begin to address some of this. And I know, just anecdotally, a pretty significant funder has already seen this and is excited about it. And so I think there's enthusiasm, but, unless there's a proper, setup for that, both, I think it has to be a combination of both, endowed, maintenance fund plus sustained and clear public finance solution.
And I'll just say, in the captain's chair, we're not sitting on our laurels. We're trying to find different opportunities for revenue generation. That's why we passed the naming rights policy. That's why we have a sponsorship policy, a memorial bench and tree program. And we're always looking for those partnerships because we realize we can't do it all alone. And also our general fund is not growing at a rate equal to our park system. So, we are trying to hedge off those really hard conversations for as long as we can, but ultimately there may come the time where infrastructure is placed, but then, pay to play is kind of a fee-based park system for programming and other things. But we're trying to hedge that off with all the partnerships. And I'll say that Zionsville really does come to the table, and we've found partners in just about every place we've looked, and we've really been successful with our programming and what we're able to do there through sponsorships and naming rights and all of that. So, the ability for Mindy and her team to stretch $1 and get, $10 worth of service is pretty true to the values we hold. And we're exploring that just as much on our operational side with maintenance.
yeah, 100%. I don't think there's any question that you guys are doing that to the degree that you can, the best degree that you can as we continue to grow. I think specifically with Carpenter, because it's such a large asset, both in its actual scale and capital scale, but also in its impact to the community and the participation of the foundation so actively in the amount of funds that have been committed already. I think a really important, probably ongoing discussion to have with them is sort of the balance of, who's sort of targeting and planning for capital and raising money for capital versus maintenance and operations, right? And what's the role between the foundation and the town as it relates to new capital and maintenance and operations and programming? Because it's coming from the nonprofit side, it is real hard to raise money for maintenance. No one's very excited about that. It's a lot easier to raise money for, get big donations for new capital or, compelling programs or things like that, but maintenance and operations is pretty unsexy money. So I think that that's just something we need to, be an open dialogue with them about, because I know that they're trying to grow and open that facility, and right now there's so many needs that are both capital and operational that it's a little bit of triage, but we want to make sure that I think we have those conversations.
How do we put kind of next steps to this, right? Because 2026 is going to be here before you know it, like 2026 budget season is going to be here before we know it. Who needs to be involved in that conversation? How do we get line of sight to that? Because this is a very ignorant question, but like, we don't set your operational budget, right? We're pretty much, this governing body here, we don't set Jared's operational budget, right?
Correct. That is the responsibility of town council.
So, town council would need to weigh in on what that looks like, and to be empathetic to town council, right, they're gonna have competing priorities of police force that need public safety that needs, right, there's a lot of competing priorities there, so I think we just need to bubble this up, and I don't know, John, if you have recommendations on how we get that to town council to make sure that our assumption about operationally what we think it's gonna look like meets what the town council has in a long-term financial plan.
Do you?
I'll have to think about that, how to.
Well, I almost wonder if there isn't a scenario that is similar to like capital improvement plans, right? Where you might have like a 5-year CIP, which I think we do, right? It's essentially the master plan, but that also takes into operational, sort of projects the anticipated departmental budget over 5 years, so that could be presented annually and updated, but it's not just a 1 or 2 year window. It's looking out over the 5 years of the master plan that they just approved.
And that is actually an exercise we are conducting with Mayor Stairs' administration. We are, for the first time, kind of projecting 5 years out, and then that'll be revised. And so working with Crow, our financial, partners, they're trying to make that realistic based on projections of what we anticipate revenue to meet.
So maybe let that exercise play out and you bring back the findings of what your budget looks like in 2026?
Sure.
Is that fair?
Yep. And I think there's also an opportunity during the 2025 budget cycle to make our intentions known for our needs in the following year.
But we're going through a process in town with the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
And I've been asked to sit in on meetings. I certainly intend to champion this in those meetings among other leaders in the town, among other taxpayers in the town, so that they're well aware of what, to the best of my ability, what we're trying to accomplish with Carpenter. And it is going to be an ask at some point, but they need to know what that story is. We need to be able to tell them all of the stuff that the staff report to us. We need to be their champions out in the community at all times. Every time something comes up that's related to green space or parks or nature, we need to be singing their praises.
Right.
So that they get the support when they need it.
Well, and I think part, because I'm on that same group, right?
Yeah, I got your invitation.
Yeah. Good, I'm glad. Very, very passionate about the need to shift the conversation around parks at the sort of decision-making level away from amenity to infrastructure, right? That parks are critical infrastructure, but they're usually, and I think everybody in the town and the elected level would say, yeah, of course they are, but they're not managed and funded the same way that critical infrastructure is. So, and I think that this exercise of starting, the 5-year operational planning and like all of that, I think is a great first step to get that in place and make that a regular, make that just routine.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think as we all hear more about the comprehensive plan, which is going to be an 18-month process, so I wouldn't be surprised that we're going to be talking about it for a while, and it'll probably come back up and up. Is I think a big focus of that plan, as is common with a lot of communities like ours, will be on quality of life, as a metric of success for our community and all the different attributes to that, but parks has to be at the table for that. So as we think about how Zionsville grows to become what it should be, or what if we want to keep it, or whatever for the next 50 years, parks have to be a part of that equation. But you have to make that work financially too, just like we are with utilities and streets and roads and everything else. You know, in a great school system, it's part of that mix.
Well, this is where I get a little fuzzy on sort of the role and function of the board versus the foundation, where it's not really our role, as I understand it, to be, like, technically, we're not the advocacy group of parks, right? I mean, that's not our function. We are to be advocates, and I get that, but I think that's sort of like, maybe there's even just like some education I feel like I still need to understand, you know, what historically has been those sort of funding mechanisms or structures or conversations, because I feel like I'm realizing this conversation that I have this knowledge gap, that I wouldn't be able to give good insight if this is a good idea or not without knowing some of these things. You know, whereas, you see where I'm going with this, is like, if there's a mechanism that needs to happen at a policy level to change the way public financing works in Zionsville to make sure that we are funding long-term, if it's an impact fee or a park district, or, I don't necessarily think that comes from us, but how do we facilitate to make sure that we're exploring options? And you see what I'm saying? Like, that's where I'm a little confused of, like, this conversation is valuable, but I also don't know what is actionable from our end. Does that make sense?
Sure, I think it's a shared responsibility, honestly. I think that it's, you know, part of our job as this board is to be aware of the needs of our system as a whole, operationally, financially, and to be advocates for solutions to those. But at the same time, ideally, you have a community advocacy partner that is, you know, truly lobbying on behalf of the park system, you know, to our elected officials. That's where it gets difficult for us. Like, we can say, hey, there's a challenge, or we foresee a challenge. Here are solutions. Here are ones that we see viable. But it's pretty difficult in the context of this board to go knock on doors and say, hey, we want this, or this is what you should do and why. But that, I do think, is a critical role that the foundation needs to play. And I know that that's a role, you know, that, like, it's a very young group. It's a very motivated group. It's a fairly well-funded group for as young as they are. You know, there's a lot of emphasis, obviously, on Carpenter, but at the same time, and we just went through a strategic planning exercise last year, and I'm not at liberty to share all of that, but the perspective of that organization is beyond Carpenter. It is system-wide, and advocacy is a part of that. But I do think it is, we need to communicate as a town park board and a park department with them, I think, what we foresee as needs on the advocacy side, so that they have focus. Because I think their end is like, we'll advocate for parks and nature and conservation, but I mean, you could do that a million ways, right? Whereas we know, I think, there are certain strategic challenges that may be structural to the sort of how the government operates or whatever that we might want to change, so.
It would be helpful for me, like, just some basic stuff, like, you know, benchmarking us against our neighboring communities and peers as far as, you know, per capita spend for park, and some of that information at some point I think would be a good thing for this board to see, to sort of.
I believe the majority of that's baked into the 5-year master plan.
Okay. So I just need to read it closer.
You gotta dive into the parts of that plan that we spend so much time on and no one reads.
Exactly.
They're less flashy.
It's
in there, I mean,
It's a good
Trish is
plan.
nodding, yeah.
It's a good plan. I think we just need confirmation for what we assumed in that plan is gonna happen in reality. Because I think the reality is nobody here has the fiduciary authority to fund that. And so I think we need to make sure that we have line of sight of if that will be funded, when it will be funded. And that's not to put pressure on the town council, that's to make sure that we have realistic expectations as we get ready to embark on this beautiful piece of property that could just be it is such a gem, it will be such a gem. But I think we just need line of sight that we're gonna be able to operate that. And if not, what trade-offs do we have to make in order to operate that the way we want to?
Well, and I think also in the context of that, keeping in mind that Carpenter's just one project, right? It's a huge one.
Yep.
But there's other stuff in the 5-year plan that I think we're still tracking. So, you know, it's, I think, keeping the big picture of all this growth in mind and be proactive and not reactive, so.
Are we at, you know, kind of next steps here? I see CD set for August, which that's what, a month away, right? So we're through SD, DD, and now we're now at CD.
We're getting there, yep, yep.
We're like 50%.
Yep.
How are we tracking budget-wise with SD? Like, do we have it broken down where we're at with SD, where we're at with DD, where we're at with CD? If we've had any scope creep, where we're at tracking budget-wise?
We're fine within the scope of services of the contract that was already authorized and,
Okay.
and expended for.
Are you talking about professional services or construction budget?
Construction budget.
Yeah, so the construction budget, we're refining, those numbers are getting tighter, and it's getting based off of our anticipated available funds
Yeah.
that we will have through these grants and impact fees.
Is that something that we have line of sight to? Because I think I would be curious to see from those different kind of traditional stages where we were at, if programming changed at all with that. And I'm also curious from like a contingency standpoint, where we're tracking at that. So as we are at 100% CD and we're off and running and we're going, like, do we have the wiggle room to navigate that, right? Because I think there's financial risk when you do a big project like this, right?
Right.
Doesn't mean we should be scared of it and approach it with fear, but I think having line of sight to that data would be helpful for
Sure,
us.
I can have that prepared for next month.
That's
What
great.
what contingency do you normally include as part of an overall project budget?
Is it 15 or 20?
So 15% just for straight contingency, but then the sort of contingency until we get down to our 100% CDs
Mhm.
has erosion control, has maintenance of traffic, has general conditions, kind of those blank numbers that we know contractors put on. Right now, it's a contingency, it's a portion of the total. As we get closer to 100% CDs,
Yeah.
that 15% will be the contingency, and those numbers actually move into line items.
Yeah.
We know how much silt fence we know how much, those specific things.
And I'll say to REA's estimates, with our last project, they were within 3%. So that was, and one project actually bid under, so.
I was assuming you said 3%, came in 3% under, or no?
Over.
Over,
But
okay.
the other one was under, so.
All right.
To be within 3% either direction is
Absolutely,
remarkable.
yeah, exactly.
In this
Especially with
market,
how
yeah.
construction has
Wild
evolved
world out there.
in the past couple of years.
For the record, I have read most of the Parks plan. I do need to go back and look at it.
Hey, benchmarking is great, right? It's a great.
Gotta move away from the pretty picture part of it.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
the-
Oh, this is
yeah.
great. Yeah, let's do
Yes.
it.
But it is true, I mean, the big problem is we're an election away from people deciding that that's not what they want to do.
It's not a priority for the,
Yeah.
right. Let me be clear on that. I'm not saying that it's not a priority,
Right.
it's telling more, there's a risk always that if any kind of changing of the seats, that the priorities change.
Well, I think that is a core function of a 5-year master plan, right? Is that it is an adopted plan by the town.
Yes.
I mean, it is, now, that doesn't mean that it won't be shared at the same level of priority, but that is what we have to stand on as our trajectory. And I do think that it is important as we bring on new council members, that they're briefed on what that plan is, that it is adopted, and here are things that we're tracking, here's progress that's made. So I don't know how we do that sort of within our world, but I think that that's sort of, I don't think it should be viewed as this is up for grabs. I don't think it's as important, so let's push
Actually,
this to the
Ryan,
side.
you mentioned Crow you're working with Crow on a 5-year financial forecast, so it seems like they're kind of taking all the inputs of all the different departments, putting it into a long-range financial plan. So it sounds to me like from what Jared has shared, that there's some rigor that the town's putting in.
Yeah.
And we just need to let that,
Yeah, yeah.
let that process
Yeah, I
play
think
out.
that would be the first goal of doing what we talked about, is getting that in place, and that's already in process. So then it's a matter of keeping it.
Great.
All right, back to Tricia. Okay.
I'd love it. Do you have the playground slide?
We do. These are
Oh,
hot
yeah.
off the
Yeah,
press,
yeah.
yeah. So these were just kind of thumbs
Yes,
up this
I agree.
afternoon.
I agree.
So one more image before that is the restroom. So accessibility for all ages and all abilities is extremely important in our park system. So while we do have non-accessible restrooms concerning the turning radiuses, we have accessible restrooms as well as a changing table that could accommodate an adult. So
Bravo for
just
that. That's
speaking with our community, that's been identified as a need and a barrier to some families enjoying our parks. So each restroom we build moving forward will accommodate those as one of the expenses that just have to go into it. And they're not
these
cheap.
are all individual stalls, so they're not
Yes.
gender-based restrooms,
Mhm.
they're just
That-
single user.
That's correct. So the playground design, I'm going to steal your thunder, Tricia, so you better get up here. This was her idea. As she mentioned, there were concepts all along the way that we kind of rejected because we really wanted nature play to be the focus. And, you know, there's some really great timber structures that kind of look like telephone poles that are stacked together, and that's not really what we wanted to do here. So the hard part is you can put a tree out for people to play on, but that's not going to cover your liabilities concerning fall protections and, you know, what's appropriate for people to be activating and utilizing. So within our budget for kind of this phase 1 playground, and this would be one of 2 playgrounds on the site, this is the concept for what that playground would entail. So it would be the engineered mulch, which can provide an accessible surface, within a concrete band on the site. The main features would be 2 large trees that could be played on, climbed and explored under. And then there is the concept of a path that gets you towards about a 5-foot elevation, which would allow you to slide back into the primary park. And along the way, there are stones and logs to climb. Additionally, there would be 2 trees planted inside of the playground. So definitely selecting a species that's not going to drop things all year long, and something that would be appropriate for that. But 1, building in shade towards the early years of that playground, but also 2, really losing the playground into the site and it feeling a part of it rather than an abstract construct that was placed onto the nature preserve. So a couple of images of what that could look like. So lots of native plantings around the site, and then obviously the structures in the middle for children to play on and get all that energy out while they get off the school bus and wait for their day at Carpenter Nature Preserve to begin.
Jared, who weighed in on the design of this? Was there a focus group or anything like that?
No, the focus group was primarily myself and the architects.
I have to push back on our parks overall. Coming from a parent of a young family, kids, friends with young family, I find that our park, not that they're in poor shape, they're underwhelming. So you can go to the neighbors to the east or to the west, and the level of things for kids to play on, just a different scale, just a different experience. I was hoping to see more, and I understand there's probably some budget constraints with that, but I look at this and I put it in context of my family. I don't think that my 10, 7, 3, or 1-year-old would see this as a destination to go play at. They would probably go to a neighboring town to the east or the west to go play at. I was hoping to see more. I don't intend to be too harsh tonight, but I feel like as my friends have learned that I'm on the Parks Board, that's the feedback that they've given me, and that's the feedback that I have from the community. And I'm sure we have competing priorities. I don't know, parents of young kids up here as well too, what your perspectives are at, but I was expecting to see something more grandiose.
Sure, that makes absolute sense. And if you look to our neighboring communities, which either have larger populations or potentially a larger budget, they can develop those more grandiose destinations. And I would say that that's definitely something we want to provide to our community, but it's not necessarily the identity of our community. So a town within a park, Zionsville parks are very much based in nature and nature education. And with 500 acres, the majority of those are passive and were historically. And you would think with that much passive space and then, you know, seeing all the exciting things that other communities have, that we would want more skate parks and more dirt bike courses, which they want those as well. But if we look in that 5-year master plan, right up there at the top was more passive parks. So it's a little, I completely understand your expectations for something more
May just be
grandiose.
one person's opinion here. I don't know.
Well, so I'll add I wouldn't say a competing, but an alternative perspective to that. And this is based on my professional experience as a playground designer, landscape architect, park planner, but also as a Zionsville resident with multiple young kids. 22 to be specific, 50% revenue.
Okay. I wonder if you that would belong to.
I think I was giving myself more credit. Any one of the 3 kids would be like, get out of here. You know, to Jared's point, the challenge that we have in quote unquote competing with adjacent, and this is something to keep in mind with the comp plan, right, which is something we're talking about, the commercial tax base of our neighbors to the left and right are radically different. So they have access to entirely different budgets. When you think about a destination playground, something that you might see in West Carmel, you know, or even what they just built in Whitestown, that's easily more than half the budget of the entire project of phase 1 of Carpenter. I mean, you could easily spend $1.5 million on a playground and not be the biggest and best one in the northern counties. It's insanely expensive stuff. You know, and you'll spend, depending on what the surface is, you'll spend half of that budget on the play surface alone. You can spend $500,000 on the play surface. So it's just insanely expensive for that structured, contemporary play that I do think has a place in our system, and we should aspire to that, and I think it has a role in every park system. But at the same time, one of the things that as playgrounds have evolved over the last 50 years, you know, from being nature-based play that we all did, and it's, you know, not me, because it was before I was born, but for generations where it was literally you played with balls and sticks, and you played in the creek, and you ran in the woods, and you had swings, to being really regimented and structured and engineered and liability-driven, we've lost touch with nature-based play. And so I think that a trend nationwide is reconnecting our younger generations with play in the natural environment. And it is more structured than just, hey, there's the woods, go play. It's reintroducing them to ways to interact with nature and the natural environment and natural materials and and I think this is an important component of that, and something that I would recommend adding to this program, which is very cost effective, is self-directed play. Right, where if you think about a contemporary play structure, it may be sexy as hell to look at and crazy, but it is very structured. You play with that in the way that engineers and attorneys, no offense, engineers and attorneys have said you will play with it. That's the way it's designed to be played with, whereas nature-based play requires you to use your brain. And it requires you to, you know, look at things and come up with your own way to interact with them. So as I look at an image like this, understanding a couple things. One, it's probably a very preliminary rendering.
Right.
That's a log that you were able to download. We don't know what tree we're going to use, right? So there's a lot of change that still happen there. But one thing I would love to see as a component of this are, you know, more sensory-based experiences. You know, sand-based play areas. You know, a whole area where you could have a combination of loose parts, right? Which is where you have pre-selected sticks. Doesn't that sound like a ridiculous? But you get sticks, right? And you just have them out, and kids will build with them. They'll play with them. They'll imagine with them. But they're doing it with their own brains, and those cost $0. But it's facilitating that reconnection to nature and self-directed play that structured play doesn't have.
And that's what I wanted to drive is, that's what Carpenter Nature Preserve. We don't want to.
Carpenter's not the.
Right, so the idea was not, you don't want to have
Right.
swings that going back and forth and people yelling and screaming. This is a nature park, so this is for people to, not just to, you know, to experience nature and to enjoy nature. So I understand what you're saying where that's required, but like.
Is there something else in the future where you could have more of a destination?
Yeah, and I think we need that. I do think that
We're missing that in Zionsville.
Yeah, I
Yes.
Totally agree.
But at the same time, we're also, every time we come up to a budget, we're, you know, with any project, it's like, oh my God, the needs are so great and the budget is so small. How do we do the best that we can? But I think that that's a good example too, where when you partner with like a foundation, that's a really sexy thing to fund.
Yeah.
You know, to find a partner, a healthcare partner, or someone who might have an interest specifically in theming a playground or something like that. But we got to figure out a way to do both. I do think Carpenter is a better location for something like this, but I want to see it true nature and sensory based play. It doesn't have to be elaborate and expensive, but it needs to be comprehensive and immersive. And I think that we're on the way to that, and I can't wait to see the next iteration of that and what that looks like.
I think the playgrounds in our parks are meant mostly for, you know, like, at least if I'm thinking of my kids, we're going on walks, and it's a thing they'll stop at and play with for 5 minutes and then continue on, right? We don't have something that they necessarily beg to go to.
Destination
It's like
park,
West
playground.
Park and stuff, yeah.
Right, I think an interesting anecdote is, and Tricia maybe feels the same way or doesn't in her professional experience, but we have designed or built playgrounds that are well north of $1 million, where a lot of times when you excavate out the base for the play surfacing, just like you would concrete, you end up with spoil with cut that you're moving somewhere. It usually gets mounded on site and covered in turf, right? That stupid turf hill is the most played on thing at that playground.
Yeah.
It is. It always is. It always is. It's like that at Sandorf. It's like that in
Yeah.
multiple other parks. What's the most used thing at Lions Park where you always see kids? Or where they store the dirt hills for the infield.
Yeah. So,
It's 100% true.
my,
So it doesn't have to be $1 billion to.
my kids are now older, but we've been here for a long time. There is a park, and I don't know whether you guys have seen this, it's Smale Park, Great Adventure Park, or Playground. It's on the Riverwalk in Cincinnati. And it is essentially, I envision, it was the dirt mound that has, like, one side's got a slide on it now. There's stonework put in another so they can work. There is some netting and stuff so they can climb under it and over it and all of that. It's kind of the marriage of the two ideas of the park. But it looks very like it was the mound that got left when they dug out the side of the bridge, and then they fancied it up. And I love this. I tell everybody that I see about this park because I thought it was the coolest thing. And it's, it's kind of almost four-sided, but if you Google it, I'm Googling now, you can see the pictures of it, but it would, and I think it would be something that would potentially partner well with what we're also trying to accomplish at Carpenter, but give a little bit more oomph. So,
Yeah, you can make that feel like it was part of nature.
yeah.
I think your points about Carpenter are well taken, right? That's not the tone and tenor we're looking for with Carpenter. I would just challenge us as a team, as we look at future developments, is there's other developments coming into Zionsville. I know you talked about getting in early with developers.
Yeah, the one thing, but you mentioned the development's coming, so what happens in these developments is there's always natural areas, just like what we're doing over here in Wild Air.
Right.
That the goal is to preserve it, to make it a passive park, because we're already messing everything else up. So we don't get what's given to us is told to save. So we're stewards of our land here. We are all stewards of our parks. All right, we are to care for these parks and to grow the parks, So, and overall need of the town is to preserve, and that's for the years I've been on here, they wanted us to have the park has to have a park board. The park has to have be part of the like the Monon Center. We have, but that's not us. That's not the park board. The park board is we're preserving of land and enjoying nature. And that's what
Well,
and we do have those needed parks, but we don't get our opportunity is very low. I mean, what I'm saying is that to get those.
And I'll just say one more thing, Chad. I completely understand that perspective of something grandiose, and especially for new residents moving in, seeing our peer communities with those. But I think we aren't quite to the level where we're building regional parks just yet. Carpenter's our opportunity for the first, but with that, we're doing it in phases. So there's no nature center today, there's no tree canopy walk, but as those items came in the future, then we would be more of a regional destination. So day one, cutting the ribbon, we're attracting the bird watchers and the people that are there as a nature preserve. But as White Oak Commons and all those other ideas come to fruition, that's when we become the regional draw. And that's when we're getting every school bus in 50 miles and every family from Carmel and Avon. And so I think we're still building community parks to meet the needs of our community. And we haven't been able to evolve yet to those larger.
Yeah, and I agree with all these points. I think this is a really fascinating conversation for, I think the other thing to keep in mind too is like how do you differentiate, right? And so are there opportunities to be the different experience that you travel to as well, while still also providing those opportunities for our residents to have those grandiose experiences. And I have a very different opinion as my experience, because having a kid who doesn't like to be around screaming kids, like has sensory needs, so this is what I want. This is exciting, like just like to be able to walk feel like to escape and be in the woods and be solitary, because even though there will be a lot of people with this, you can tell it's designed in such a way where you can get solitude, you know, and it's gonna be a different type of pace, and so, but again, I think it's like accommodating for as wide a spectrum of needs and interests and, you know, and, desires as possible within the character and the distinctiveness. I always use this analogy of baseline, distinctive, exceptional. You need to hit certain baselines to compete for your peer communities, right? So what are the baseline needs that we need to make sure we hit? Then what are the things that make us distinct from those communities? And this could be one of those distinctive features. And then what do you do exceptionally well? You can't do everything exceptionally well, so choose a couple, right? And focus on those. And so I think as we think about our system, I think it's a good thing to go back to, like, are there baselines that we're just fundamentally missing? And it may be that we need to have, like, it sounds like everyone agrees that there may sort of a destination playground, but to your point, I think it's really good. Like, we are not quite at the spot where we're have a regional park yet.
Right.
And so, and to have this may be that regional park, but we're doing this one because it competes in a way that's cost effective and is different than what's being offered in some of those other places. So,
Well,
anyways.
I think an important thing to consider in the context of our earlier conversation around the comp plan, and your comment about, you know, we're a steward of I don't disagree with that, but I also think that that's a position that's set and has been historically the precedent because of our lack of funding and the lack of sophistication or the perspective of the value of parks in the town. And I don't think that that's something that we necessarily accept as, you know, something that will continue in perpetuity. I think we have the ability to change that with the comp plan. So we don't want to get on a soapbox here, but we need to continue as this board, as the comp plan continues to evolve, to clearly define our expectations of the development community as it relates to contributing to parks. Because we don't have all the funding levers that we can pull like other communities can outside of our state as it relates to levies and taxes and things like that. We don't have that. We don't have access to that. So if we're going to allow developers to come in and we're going to concede all these things to them so they can make their millions and millions and millions of dollars building beautiful buildings and bringing great residents to our community, that's great. But they need to offset the impact of their developments beyond just the park impact fee. That's a given. That's a baseline. But if they're going to build parks as green space, we need to have clear standards around what that looks like, what it contains, what the standard is for that, who has access to it. All of that needs to be something that, when we talk about comp plan, that's put in there, because that ultimately is what guides that. And without that structure, you don't have any teeth to stand on. You end up with whatever they give
Whatever you get left.
whatever the minimum definition of green space is. That's why you get like a square retention pond or these shit pieces of land that they literally gave you what they didn't want, and we're calling it green space, and that's not equitable. So we need to change that in the comp plan. And there are numerous cities where, you know, the pushback is, well, no one will develop here. It's a development cost that they won't pay. It's a garbage argument. And you can prove that statistically. I mean, we're working with Henderson, Nevada right now. For 30 years, they've had a 12-cent sales tax for parks. They're one of the fastest growing communities in that region, continually.
That's where all my relatives live.
Right, because they built great parks. It's a system that's well funded and connected, and they've elected to pay for it for 30 years. And the developers have built the whole time. I mean, it's the most.
Lots of shade, we hope.
Yeah, well, we're helping with that now. That's part of the challenge. But anyway, you know, it's so the conventional arguments of why that would never work are not actually based in fact.
Yeah.
So we need to push back on that, because developers they're very important. They're great partners, can be great partners, but a lot of times they walk away with the overwhelming benefit of that development, and then we're left trying to figure out how we provide the same quality of life for those residents without access to any resources.
I have a quick question. It's not part of phase one, but the dog park on there. I live right beside Heritage Park, and I was so excited to get a dog park, and I don't think I've ever seen more than 2 dogs in that park. Is there a demand for the dog park, or is there something we get audible?
So the dog park proposed for Carpenter Nature Preserve, one, you know, would be for future residents, but two, equally important, I know, I'm a dog owner, I know exactly what's going to happen the second you feel like you're out of sight with a dog on a rustic trail at Carpenter Nature Preserve. They're going off leash. So we're gonna have signs, obviously, these are leashed parks, but I know exactly the behaviors that we'll see at this park, because we see it at every other park where there's open space. So the dog park was an opportunity and a chance to limit where dogs could be out on leash on purpose. There would be natural features in there that would enhance and make it a fun experience for both the dog and the person, obviously. And then we would limit what trails the dogs could also be on. So there's true separation from those that are terrified of dogs, from those ground nesting birds that'll be throughout the site as well. So that was very purposeful, and the reason it's not in phase one is because we just couldn't afford it, and that was one of the items that was quickly cut. But I do think that, and especially, not to fear monger, but imagine 50 years from now when everything around this is developed, especially with LEAP District and other incentives to have development in this area, that there will be communities that want to use that as their dog park. It's the only park in Union Township right now, well, soon to be. So,
Well, and though not many dogs are at the park at any given time, we're selling passes or
yeah,
at
so
a decent rate.
our membership is over 250 members. So it's a portion of our community, and I too drive by many times, and there's 1 or 2 dogs there. I have learned there are social clubs that show up at 6 p.m. or things like that where I don't get to see that, but we do look at the gate activity, and it'll be 50 people a day throughout the 16-hour day. But look at how many developments have popped up since we built that dog park. The property right across the road, those houses are still being moved in and built, and I think that usership will grow in the future as well.
And again, from an accessibility standpoint, from personal experience, we cannot go to parks where dogs are off leash.
Yeah.
Because the person will say, "Oh, our dog's friendly." It's like, that's not the issue.
It's not
Right.
Yeah. So I appreciate that sort of finally striking that balance, because I also respect that people do want to have places to take their dogs, but when something's labeled specifically, and that gets violated, it's like,
Absolutely.
it's hard, so.
And without the dog park, we are proposing signage where some trails will allow dogs here and then others won't. And then our on-site staff will have to enforce that. And it's not fun to do anyways, but we will do our best, keeping eyes on things.
I'm excited looking at the map still. I mean, it's gonna be a gem, right? We had a very hearty discussion here, lots of different viewpoints. It doesn't take away from the excitement.
Yeah.
It'll be a great.
I appreciate all the work that's happened to date, the work that'll happen going forward, because it's gonna be a gem for us.
Well, and we need to remember too, that this is a classic, like a shining example of how with our town and our limited resources that we have from a funding standpoint for parks are able to do something pretty amazing
Yeah.
through leveraging, a great private partner, right? A new foundation, multiple grants. We're working harder to do what we're doing than our neighbors to the east or the west are. So we just something not to degrade them at all. We have to work so hard to do something like this. So it's commendable to the foundation, to Jared and his team, because it will be a generational asset.
And again, anecdotally, the funder that I'm aware of who's seen this and got really excited doesn't get excited just about anything. It's a very disillusioned funder these days, and is a funder that never gives outside of Marion County typically. So I think this is an example of it is an inspiring place. So so congrats.
Thank you all. I really appreciate all the different viewpoints
Very
and
good discussion.
comments today.
Conversation.
We are a diverse community, so all of those opinions need to be brought forth with this board, so I appreciate it.
All right. I think we've,
Get to the last slide
get
here.
the last, Fright Nights. Let's put this thing on.
There we go.
I was going for a record.
So next steps, just to recap,
Yeah.
at the August meeting, we'll have the CD set for you all to review and provide comments with. Pending approval of that review, we can offer to bid. So the bidding dates would begin in September, with a pre-bid meeting in mid-September. Bids would be due in October, with the review of those bids at the October Park Board meeting. And upon a responsive in-budget bid, we could move forward with authorizing that construction contract. So prior to these dates, I will make sure that you all understand the available budgets today for phase one. our operational anticipation for opening the doors and keeping the restrooms clean, and where we go from there. That's what I will provide for you all. And one note, one asterisk, so there are ARPA funds associated with a portion of this grant funding. So the reason this timeline seems to be approaching pretty quick and we don't have much wiggle room is because those funds do need to be committed by December 31st of this year. We don't have to spend them, but we do have to commit them. So that contract would commit those funds. Should we not accomplish that, so our timeline does allow, should we not receive any bids, we will have time to rebid and try one more time. But should we not, we would be out $75,000 that would be appropriated somewhere else in the town. No pressure.
Thank you for reminding us of that, though. That's very important. We don't want to lose sight of those deadlines.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Alright.
Jared.
All right, I'll have more for you very soon.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on with new business. Last item is Fright Night MOU.
So over recent years, we have been partnering more and more with Maple Lawn Farmstead. They are our long-term tenants at a portion of Mulberry Fields, which has been dedicated and preserved as a Depression-era farmstead. We partnered with them throughout the years, but in recent history, we had our Barns and Brews program, which paired a speaker with a 21 and up event with a beverage of a local brewer. We had great success with that, and those proceeds were donated to Maple Lawn after each series. So last year, as you'll recall, if you were on the board, we did pilot a Fright Nights program, which transformed the Maple Lawn Farmstead into a haunted farmstead. This was through a very generous community member who has been hosting these types of fright houses in his own house for many years, had a large pole, and he had approached Maple Lawn in previous years about this potential opportunity. So we jumped on board with them both, and last year we piloted the program and had 910 tickets sold, and we were able to cover our expenses as well as Maple Lawn's and pay out the professional services of that fright production company. So this is the second year of that program, and we are very happy to return to it. Each party had very positive experiences. So a couple of changes. So this MOU is very similar to what was passed at last year's Park Board meeting. So for the 2024 Fright Night season, it would be for 3 days only, and that would be October 24th, 25th, and 26th. Tickets would be $10 and free for children 6 and under. The expenditures, which were budgeted within this budget cycle, for the Fright Nights company, it would be a estimated compensation of $4,150. And that would cover permitting, insurance, set design, and the labor, because he actually does hire local labor to help with that scare house. And truly, his only compensation beyond those expenses is $1,500. So it's pretty spectacular. He's providing his engineered talents and his professional tastes to this opportunity. It's very cost effective. Maple Lawn Farmstead, we would compensate them for an estimated $1,500, and that is for firewood, portable restrooms, hay bales, and a movie to show. So for your consideration this evening is to authorize this MOU between FC Fright Nights, the Maple Lawn Farmstead, and the Zionsville Board of Parks and Recreation for the 2024 Fright Nights Haunted House Series, Haunted Barn Series, and in addition to the MOU, also authorizing expenditures associated with this program not to exceed $10,000.
Can you clarify what happens with the net revenue then on that?
Yes, so these essential costs are first paid out, and then we cover our labor costs for our staff being there, and then the proceeds are donated to Maple Lawn Farmstead.
Okay.
And Jared, this MOU is just our draft that we've developed, right? Or have we circulated it and received any comment?
No comment yet.
Okay.
So pending any agreed
So it
upon
would be,
reviews.
Yeah, subject to any additional modifications based on the negotiations. But what you have in front of you is what we're proposing.
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve
Before we do that,
Yes.
just, what age groups is it? Is it targeted for? Teenagers, I'm guessing?
Definitely our preteens and teens. That was kind of the hit last year, and we would love to expand further out and get the high schoolers and young adults as well. It's pretty impressive. I believe we should have a video to share and really get excitement going. But the sets he built, I mean, it was a dropping elevator, you know, sound effects that are not just the screams you hear in movies over and over again. And it was a really impressive setup for year one. And he's going to build on that a little bit more. And I think it's going to be a good time.
Sounds like this board meeting is the most interesting board meeting we've had so far.
Well, so it's scary stuff for teens. Are they making them have like face-to-face conversations with different
And Jared, where does this money, I'm sorry if you said this already, where does
Yeah.
this money come from?
So this
Budget-
this will be funded through Fund 211, well, 2211 now, which is our non-reverting operating funds. These are the revenues generated from programming.
Okay.
And this was built into the 2024 budget.
I think that's a hard group for us to reach, so if we can take an opportunity to do something that engages that age group, that, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah,
I guess the only thing I'm wondering if there's opportunity for this is an opportunity for a fundraiser for parks. Like, I don't understand the full relationship there with the farmstead, but like, is there additional sponsorship that we could pursue that then is, or the foundation could pursue to use it as a fundraising opportunity, or?
So when we partner with Maple Lawn Farmstead, so Maple Lawn Farmstead is a 501c3 volunteer board that have maintained those buildings since they were gifted around 2028.
So there's an asset in the park system in that regard.
Essentially, it's
Yeah.
a cultural experience. They do have their own programming throughout the year, so we've
Yeah.
just embraced them as a partner and providing new experiences.
Gotcha.
And as a unique thing within our park system, it's one of the, well, I guess we changed the policy around alcohol. It used to be one of the only places where you could serve alcohol with
Gotcha.
in a park system.
So,
That's not
and so they've allowed us, you're saying we've hosted events that do benefit us there as well.
So, you know, it's the balance of providing for our community and then generating revenue. So our goal is to be cost neutral.
Yeah, okay,
Cost
gotcha.
neutral, yeah.
I think Matt and I can attest, they put on a pretty good ice cream social.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah, you were there too,
I missed that one, so. All right.
Well, I move that we approve the MOU.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, and I'll provide a financial report after the event later in the year.
Thank you.
Jared, on a side note, what happened to, did Barnes and Brews happen and I missed it? Because I love that thing
No,
too.
we tried for 3 months to find a vendor, and that was our biggest hiccup. We couldn't find somebody that wanted to sell their beverages. So unfortunately, we had to pause the series this year, but with our rule update and with, you know, future years, we look to bring back some type of programming that invites 21 and plus crowds to have an experience in our parks too.
All right, old business. Anyone have anything they'd like to bring up and discuss?
Yeah, we have the claims coming up here, I think maybe for next board meeting, if we could get line of sight again on where we're at within our accounts, so we can see now that we're halfway through the annual year and also the fiscal year, where we're tracking.
Absolutely.
Anecdotally, where would you say we're tracking? Are we tracking on budget, or are we over, are we under?
Under on most lines, tightening up on a couple, but
Okay.
I'm feeling very good about this fiscal year,
Confidence level that we'll stay within budget,
100%.
100%?
Yep.
Okay.
That's pretty confident.
Pending any park emergencies.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, no park
Stay 100%
emergencies.
within budget, we just may need to adjust.
He has one.
We will get authorization before we
Yeah.
Um, With that too, I don't think it's appropriate for discussion tonight because it's been a long meeting, but at the next meeting, I think it'd be good to have a discussion about what a plan is to wrap up Overly Warman.
Yes.
It's officially summer, officially by any way you can count it. They're not done, haven't seen it out there. Time to cut bait, move on, come up with plan B. But I want to officially, as a board, initiate that process.
Absolutely.
Any other items? All right, moving to claims. They want to get a chance to review claims as presented.
Yep.
Yes.
Do we have any questions or concerns with the claims?
No.
Do we have a motion to approve claims as presented?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Brian Cabridge,
Aye.
Michael Kaufman,
Aye.
Chris Barksdale,
Aye.
Kimberly Lane,
Aye.
Chad Dilly,
Aye.
Matt Milburn,
Aye.
and I, John Slavich, say aye as well too. Claims have been approved. Next meeting is August 14th, 2024, at 7 o'clock. And do we have a move for adjournment?
So moved.
Do we have a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Meeting adjourned.